Alright, so we've learned how to put in details on Franklin, we've figured out how to UV map him and export those UV maps and do varieties of details in different ways. Now we're going to figure out how to put in bones into Franklin and pose him. That's going to be an exciting thing. So if you remember, working with skeletons, you don't ever want to apply skeletons into a perspective view camera. So I'm going to go from here to modeling, from modeling to rigging, and I'm going to go into the skeleton tool and start creating joints. Now with the creating joints options, the big trick when you're working with a character is figuring out where to start the joints. Now, quadrupeds are very easy, similar to bipeds. You always start your first joint at the hip. And by the hip, I mean not the shoulders up front, but the hip at the back. And what we do is we try to make sure that the joints stay sort of central in the body mass, because that makes life a little bit easier. And if you don't like something, just undo or delete the whole thing. And let's try again. I'm going to move in a little bit closer. I'm going to hold down X to snap it to the first point. And then I will just add in some points as we go. And I'll call that a day. And while we're here, I'm going to move this forward. So you can always edit the placement of joints, but beware, if you want to move something in between, you can't do it just like that. You actually want to hold down D, or rather select D, before you end up relocating any joint. The reason for that is because each of these joints in the joint chain are parents of each other. So if I move, say, outside of D, if I were to select this, the entire chain moves it with it, which is why the placement and the order of these things actually becomes really important. And if we want, let's make sure we're x-raying the joints so that we can see where it is. But we're going to create multiple joint chains to help make this whole thing work. So I'm going to hit Y to reactivate the tool and set up one joint at the end of the tail. Notice that's almost in the body itself. And because this tail extends out pretty straight, I'm just going to do this. Hold down Shift while you click, and it will always make for a straight line. And once again, we've got this kind of going. Now the thing that you might start to get concerned about is if the joints are too big for your geometry. If you're working with a small model, this can happen very, very easily. And it's not the end of the world, it's just visually really exhausting. So what can really help is go in over here, select your hierarchy, which is all of the joints, and reduce the radius from 0.5 to 0.2, for example, so that then that's the size and it fits perfectly inside of your geo. The other thing that you can do is go into display options, go into animation, and change your joint size from 1 to whatever works for you. And if not, just leave it at 1 and keep adjusting the radius as you like. Now I'm going to do a joint chain just for, say, the neck and the head, which is a very short joint chain. But I will do one here to kind of help it join there, because all of these points are going to eventually intersect as well. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and then here. Now remember, each of these pivots essentially is going to be the point around which the head and everything is going to rotate. This is kind of an extra joint. It doesn't really do anything. This is going to be the part where things actually rotate around. And this is where the neck is going to come in, and this is where it's just going to join to the shoulders. But you can see, even though these are two things flowing in the same direction, I'm treating them separately. But let's come over here and look at the front view really quickly, because what I want now is to set up the legs. There's a little bit of like a step process in this. So I'm going to set this up. Actually, I'm going to hide this before I do that. I'm going to set this up here, I'm going to move this not in a straight line down, but I am trying to keep everything sort of in. Putting joints in the parts where you have rotation. Once that's done, I bring this here. You're going to see there's some issues with this, because this was a little high. So I'm going to just, again, hit D, bring this down a bit. This, well, actually it doesn't really matter. I'm actually going to take this and rotate the, nope, definitely not. It's kind of skinny legs, tough to do. So let's go ahead, grab D, and I'm going to make this happen. That's one leg. Let me just come over here. Same business, stay in the middle a little bit. Find first knee, second knee, ankle, and foot. Let's see what we got. Check this out in your perspective view. It's kind of interesting. Might want to move it. Oh, I know. Let's rotate this a little bit. And then pull this in. This is actually not best practices if you think about it, or, I mean, you don't know, but moving these things just like this can sometimes be really harmful if you were doing a real rig, but not too worried, since we are just doing a bind. And there is a difference. Okay, so let's stop really quickly and name these. And I know that naming seems like a pain, but believe it or not, it actually really helps right now, or it will really help right now, because we can use the rename tool to get things going. So I'm going to call this hip joint, and then everything here I'm going to go into modify, search and replace names, and I'm going to say search for joint, replace with spine _0. And it's working with the hierarchy. There you go. 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not too worried. Let's go again. Search and replace names. Search for joint. Replace with tail _0. There we go. And of course we don't want tail to be 06, 07, 08, so then that just becomes something which you can edit. There. Okay. And still a little bit more. Let's call this neck joint, neck, oh, let's call that head joint, and head tip. Alright, there's that, because head tip. And then now we'll do, this is the character's left side of their body. So I'm going to just open this up, say left front leg, left front, not leg, shoulder. Left front knee, oh, with 2 E's. Left front ankle, left front toe. That's fine. One more. Just gonna collapse these for a second. Open this up. Left, back, hip, left, back, knee, left, back, ankle, foot, and we could also call it palm. There are a lot of ways that you can like name things, so I wouldn't really worry about that. But here's the huge advantage about what happens when you start building this as a hierarchy and actually getting this working. Oh, we've got the wings. Let's do the wings really quickly. So the wings is going to be interesting because we're going to use 2 cameras while we do this. I just set this up like so. I'm going to start drawing them here, like so. And then I'm going to bring them out here and here. And then we'll adjust as needed. And if you want, if you feel like you need another joint in between and you forgot, you've also got an option over here called Insert Joints, which just literally allows you to insert a joint. And it won't always work the way you want it to. Sometimes it'll kind of drive you nuts. Just be careful. It's about selecting it and click and drag. Okay? Don't let go of your mouse button while you're doing the dragging, otherwise it'll double things up. But either way, we're here and we now have the left wing joint. Shoulder, left wing, elbow. Oof. Wrist. Tip. Because, that is the tip of the wing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring all of these things together. We're going to kind of like parent things to each other so that basically, the body acts like it should and, moves around as one unit and not as multiple pieces. So I'm going to grab, say, this. Oops. Still in that insert tool. So here, select this. First select the parent, which is the hip joint, and then select the child. And then hit P, and the hip joint suddenly becomes connected. Child. First select the parent, then child. Hit P. Oh, that was awkward. This is sometimes easier when you just drag something and drop it in as well. Oh, not good, not good. Back hip seems to be the one in control of everything, and we don't want that. Select parent, this. Shift select both of these joints, and then hit P. Okay, select all the children first. This is my bad. Okay, more children. All of 3 of these are going to be attached to this final joint. If I hit P, you can see now everything is connected under here, which is great. Let's make our lives even more simple. Let's select this, go into skin, and skeleton, and mirror the joints. And if they're acting funny, it's because they're not mirroring in the correct axis. So go into skeleton, mirror joints options, mirror across YZ, not XY, search for L underscore, and replace it with R underscore. Hit apply. Dun dun dun. Even better, this Left back hip is now right back hip with all of its accompanying beautiful things. So let's do the same thing up here. Hit apply. Check it out. The wing got duplicated as well. Just what we were hoping for. And before we get too crazy, let's also open this up because I want to see what stuff is here. If there's too many things, there's the neck base joint and there's the neck base joint. There's two of these because it seemed to have mirrored the entire joint, so you might end up having too many necks. So I'm gonna just drop this here. Right. That's interesting. We don't need a spine 6. Drop this into spine 5. The right wing. Sometimes you might have extra sets of joints that'll show up for no reason while you're mirroring. Clearly, actually I must have selected the main joint here and mirrored it as opposed to just this joint itself. So if that happens, just open up your outliner and you're going to find that everything should actually make sense. So you can see this is your hip joint. Everything that's parented to the hip joint is here. Your spine, the tail, the back hip, and the right back hip. Then, if we open up the spine, you're going to see these joints over here, including spine 5. And then you can see the neck, the front shoulder, the wing, the right front shoulder, and the right wing. And that's basically how we get our skeleton. So you can do a couple of other things if you're really interested. First things first, of course, let's make sure that the legs that don't match are actually things that we can adjust and work with. So let's come over here, hit F, and we don't want both of the joints, we just want the one. We're going to bring that into place. And this, you can see, is obviously out of its element. So I'm going to hit D. Whenever you're editing just a single joint placement, it's always D. And this, which I'm going to move down, forward a little bit. So it's always super helpful when you're doing stuff like this. You want to make sure that you do a bind really early on while you're doing your models. You're going to find as you try to set things up where stuff is going to go wrong, how you want to address and edit things. Also, if you have bird feet, you may want to add in a couple of little joint chains in here. This could be something really simple. I'm going to just come into my top view for this, hit F, now hit F, so we get really close to the toe, right? And then skeleton, create joints. I'm going to just set one up here, here, and here. Hit enter and select all 3 of these, scale them down. Alright, not too shabby. Now that I've scaled them down, I feel better about moving this a little bit closer because only for the places where it's going to rotate, right? And oh, there we go. I'm going to name these before I duplicate them. So here's this. Alright, claw joint 1. We can now do actually the search and replace names. There we go. So now that we've done that, I'm going to duplicate it. Be careful about how many joints you add, though. If you're not in the mood to do really, really fine work, which it's possible you're not, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is this is advanced stuff, and you don't have to know these things. This is just if you're interested in getting really, really sharp, fine detail. So here, I'm going to push this along here, shorten this up. And then I'm going to take this, duplicate it again. It's a pretty long toe. Set this up. Yeah, it's fine. Alright, so now let's just grab all 3 of these little joint chains and attach them to this group, this particular joint, and hit P. They all ended up in here in the palm, which is great. Oh, don't forget that one. Let's also pop in here. Don't forget this. So skeleton, create joints, click, click, click. Just setting up where I think it's going to rotate. So at these points and these points. And don't forget, we actually have to move that into place. Whenever you draw joints, they will always sit on an axis. So your goal is to bring them into place if your character is, a quadruped or a biped or, has limbs. All right. Back again. There. Little mouse button, drag, drop, and it'll all parent to the same stuff. Either way, we've got this. So now we have all of our joints. We have all of them attached into one hierarchy, which is the way it should be. And then we get to select our geo. Now, if you remember with geo, this is going to be something that you'll probably see is because you did so much to it, there's going to be a lot of history. History, really helpful when you're working, not helpful when you're binding. So I'm going to save this and then save a copy or file like version up basically. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to delete history off of it like so. And then select the hip joint and geo. Let's go into skin, bind skin, always go into the options. Choose joint hierarchy, 3 influences, hit apply. Now what we should see is a bound character. And the way you know it's bound is if you select a joint and you can do this essentially. Let's see, grab these. Yay! Franklin is flapping his wings. Well, in a really basic form, but you get what I'm saying. And you've got this over here. Let's grab the tail. So if it's bending weirdly whenever you do stuff, like where parts of the body are not like, are moving with the tail, for example, that's perfectly normal. That's something called skin weighting that has to be put in. But for your purposes, this is the first, and like you don't really need to worry about it as much. What you can do though is you can bend and form your your character, put your character in whatever pose you want. Delete history on it. Ooh, don't do move tool. Only rotations. Otherwise, you're going to break like the actual proportions of your character. But say, for example, if I want, I can pose my character in any which way. Using rotations. I know the temptation will be to just pick a joint and move it. Do not. There's the head. He's like, look how cool I am. Do not select the geo, only the joints when you're moving and posing your character. Turn this off if you need to, and then I'm gonna just rotate this guy around until it works the way I want it to. And maybe he's gonna be standing differently. Oops, there's a piece of his toe kind of going flying off. Yeah. I noticed that part of the foot moves when I rotate this. That's the kind of stuff that gets fixed with skin weighting. And now we can come into here, say, rotate this down a little bit. Let's select each of these little joint chains. I hit the down button to make that happen, and then so once you've gotten your well, Franklin doing frankly weird things, maybe he doesn't need to be like rotated that hard. Yeah, he's disturbing. But either way, once you've gotten him going or stand and being the way he is, you can actually select the geo. Let's bring that back. Select the geometry and duplicate it. Once you do, you're going to see Franklin the Wise becomes Franklin the Wise 1. And if we look at this in our outliner, we've got two geos, one which is bound and one which is not. And I'm going to just go over here, select all of this, right click, and unlock it. Or let's just go ahead, hide this and your joints. Delete the bottom and the front cameras because we don't need those anymore. But now, this geometry, you can completely like just go into, edit, and modify as needed. So now I can go and just be like, oh, what do I need? Maybe I need my tools. Let's go ahead, go into mesh tools, use your sculpting, maybe the smooth tool, for example, to smooth things around. You can return this back into whatever shape and form you're interested in working in. I don't like that. But anywhere where there's like weird divots and stuff, you can just go ahead, either smooth it out or edit it in whatever way works for you, works best. And here, for example, I can fix that. Can bring this back to being the way it was. You can see this area over here. I want to smooth that, so I actually can. Let's maybe scale that down a bit so I really have a bit more control. There we go. Now, mind you, 90% of the time, this is not something that's done in production at all, as in going in and sculpting the piece after it's been modeled or posed, actually, because most things have to be animated. But because painting weights and stuff isn't part of what you have to do, I fully understand the need and the usefulness of something like this. All right, so coming back. We are in business. I'm going to hit B again so that it stops doing that. And we have Franklin. Dun dun dun.